In the quiet town of Millstone, the night seemed ordinary, the streets empty and silent except for the rustling of leaves in the cold autumn wind. Clara walked slowly down the narrow lane carrying a small basket of groceries from the market, her thoughts drifting to nothing important but the smell of wet earth and the faint scent of smoke from distant chimneys made her feel strangely comforted. Behind her, the hills loomed, dark and shadowed, like silent guardians watching over the town, and for a moment she imagined the world beyond them, stretching endlessly with secrets she could not even begin to understand. She shivered though the night air was calm, and pressed the scarf tighter around her neck. Above her, the stars shone in their usual pattern, but one in particular flickered differently, a green hue, radiating like a pulse of energy. She blinked uncertainly, thinking her eyes played tricks on her, but when she lifted her gaze fully, the streak of light shot across the sky so fast it seemed impossible to believe, moving in angles no airplane could manage. It was not like any meteor she had ever seen. It twisted and curved as if alive, leaving a trail of luminous sparks that hovered briefly before fading into the darkness. Her heart began to race, and a deep sense of unease crept through her chest. Clara quickened her pace, trying to convince herself it was nothing extraordinary, just some reflection from the city, or a distant fire, but deep inside she knew this was different. The lights returned before she could reach the bridge, and this time they did not simply pass overhead. They hovered low near the treetops, and pulsed rhythmically like a heartbeat. Clara froze, unable to move, as a low hum filled the air. A sound felt like it penetrated her very bones, vibrating through her body, and stirring something ancient and fearful inside her. She wanted to call out, but her voice seemed to vanish, swallowed by the hum, and the strange green glow grew brighter until it bathed the river and the surrounding fields in an otherworldly light. Trees that moments ago were dark and foreboding now glimmered like crystals, and the water reflected shapes she could not recognize, patterns that twisted and shifted as if Olive figure began to emerge from the center of the light. Something tall and slender, but not fully formed, a shimmer of silver and green, moving with a grace that no good human could achieve. Clara's breath caught in her throat and panic surged through her veins. She stepped back toward the safety of the bridge, but her feet felt rooted to the ground, as if the earth itself refused to let her flee. The figure raised what might have been a hand, and the light pulsed stronger, sending images into her mind, flashes of places she had never been, beings she had never seen, memories that were not her own, and an overwhelming feeling of being watched and studied, as if her very soul had been examined and weighed and measured. In the silence, the world around her seemed to stretch and warp. Time became meaningless, and Clara understood in a way that terrified her that her life would never be the same again. Clara stumbled backward, her eyes wide and heart pounding as the green light hovered over the river, its glow reflecting in her wide, terrified eyes. She could feel the hum in her chest, a strange vibration that made her knees weak and her thoughts scatter like leaves in the wind. Every instinct screamed at her to run, yet she could not move, as if invisible threads held her in place. Her dog, Max, whined at her side, tugging at the leash, trying to pull her away. But even he seemed mesmerized by the light above the water. Clara's mind raced, trying to understand what she was seeing. Nothing in her entire life had prepared her for this impossible scene. The figure shimmered again, and her breath caught in her throat. It was taller than any human, yet graceful, its movements flowing, and unnatural, its outline blurred, as if it were partly made of light and partly of some material she could not comprehend. Clara took a hesitant step backward, and the light pulsed stronger, and images flashed in her mind. Memories she could not recognize filled her vision. A city of towers taller than mountains, creatures that walked on limbs bending in impossible directions, and a sky painted with colors she had no names for. She gasped and covered her face, but the images pressed in anyway, and she felt herself falling through space and time without ever moving. Max barked sharply, breaking the vision, and Clara's feet touched solid ground again. But everything felt different. The river seemed to hum faintly under the surface, and the air carried an electric charge that made the hairs on her arms stand on end. She looked back toward the light, and the figure had shifted closer, hovering just above the riverbank. She could make out something that resembled eyes, glowing faintly green, and for a moment it felt as if those eyes pierced into her very thoughts, revealing secrets she had not even told herself. She stumbled backward again, and the figure raised its arms slowly, and the light expanded into a dome surrounding her. For a brief moment, she felt weightless, as if lifted from the earth. A sudden flash blinded her and she felt the ground vanish beneath her for a heartbeat. She thought she had been pulled into the sky with the strange being, but she landed on soft grass, shivering and unsure if she had fallen or been set down. Clara's ears rang with a high-pitched tone, and she could still feel the pulse of the light running through her body. She glanced around and realized the town was nowhere in sight. The familiar bridge and streets had disappeared, replaced by the forest dense and shadowed and the river running smooth and strange in its reflection. She tried to call out for help, but her voice came out as a whisper, barely audible even to herself. The figure began to move away, gliding over the river, and Clara felt an urge to follow that she could not resist, curiosity and fear intertwining in her chest. Her legs moved of their own accord and she followed along the bank, mesmerized by the pulsing green glow and the hum that seemed to speak directly to her mind, urging her onward. As she moved deeper into the forest, the light began to fade, leaving only a lingering warmth in her chest, and an unshakable feeling that she had just glimpsed a world she would never forget, and that whatever had chosen to appear to her had a purpose she could not yet understand. Clara stumbled through the forest, her heart hammering and her breaths shallow. Every shadow seemed alive, every rustle of leaves a warning or a signal that she was being watched. The strange green light had vanished, leaving only a faint glow in her mind, like an afterimage that would not fade. She tried to retrace her steps to the bridge or even the familiar streets, but every tree looked the same, every path twisted and curved as if the forest had rearranged itself while she was distracted by the impossible vision. Her hands trembled as she clutched Max's leash, the dog whining and pawing at her boots, trying to pull her in one direction. Clara felt a pull from somewhere deep in the forest, an invisible tug that made her legs move faster and faster. She could hear a low hum vibrating under her feet, a continuation of the sound she had felt earlier, and it seemed to beckon her toward a small clearing just beyond a copse of birch trees. The air grew warmer and thicker as she approached, and the scent of ozone and metal filled her nostrils, making her stomach twist with unease. Then she saw it, a column of light piercing the treetops, a vertical shaft that shimmered and undulated, and from within it came the figure again, taller, more defined, and hovering, as if waiting patiently for her. She froze, unable to scream, unable to move, and the figure raised its hand again. Clara felt herself lifted from the ground, slowly, weightless, and her body tingled as if electricity ran along her nerves. Max barked and jumped but could not follow, his leash slipping from her hand as she floated higher and higher through the pulsing green shaft. She tried to scream for help, but the sound caught in her throat, her voice swallowed by the hum, and the rushing wind that had appeared out of nowhere. Time seemed meaningless. She could see the forest receding below her, the town shrinking into a dark patch of shapes and lights, and the sky around her twisting with colors she had never imagined. Pastels and neon streaks merged and folded over each other like liquid paint, and the figure guided her forward with a gentle motion, as if she were a passenger in some alien ritual. She felt no fear at first, only awe and disbelief at the impossibility of what was happening, and yet a deep sense of being chosen or examined filled her mind with thoughts she could not articulate. Suddenly, everything stopped, and Clara found herself lying on soft moss, her body weak and trembling. She looked around, but the forest was gone, replaced by the bridge near the river, the familiar streetlights casting pools of yellow in the night. Her basket of groceries lay intact at her feet, Max circling anxiously and whining, but something was different. A faint glow lingered on her wrist like a tattoo burning softly, and a memory she could not recall teased at the edges of her mind. Hours had vanished and she had no idea what had transpired, but she knew without a doubt that her life had been forever changed. The air was still and silent, yet she could feel the pulse of the light still whispering in her veins, and the presence of the figure still watching, waiting in the unseen corners of the night. Clara sat on the edge of her bed, the room dimly lit by the soft glow of the street lamp outside. Her window, she flexed her fingers and froze as she saw the strange symbol etched into her wrist, a faint greenish light pulsing slowly like a heartbeat. She had never seen anything like it before. Her mind raced, trying to understand where it had come from, how it had appeared, and what it could mean. The mark felt warm under her skin and tingled with a strange energy that seemed to move up her arm, into her shoulder, and down into her chest. Every time she focused on it, she felt a whisper of a voice, a sound too soft to comprehend. Words that teased at the edge of understanding, urging her to remember something she could not name. Max lay at her feet, ears perked and eyes tracking her every movement as if he too sensed the change. The house felt smaller somehow, claustrophobic yet at the same time alive, the walls pulsing faintly with energy that made her skin crawl. Clara pressed her palm against the mark and a sudden rush of images filled her mind, flashes of landscapes. She had never seen towers that reached beyond clouds, forests that glowed in colors that had no names and beings, whose shapes were impossible to describe. She gasped and stumbled backward, falling onto the bed, clutching her wrist, and the mark flared brighter for a heartbeat, then dimmed, leaving only a faint glow and a sense that she had glimpsed something forbidden and vast, beyond comprehension. The next morning, she tried to go about her day as normally as possible, but every movement reminded her of the event, the hum she sometimes heard in the air, the feeling of being watched in places she had never noticed before, and the symbol on her wrist that seemed to grow warmer every time she thought about it. Clara attempted to hide it under long sleeves, but no matter how she wrapped her arm, it seemed to pulse beneath the fabric, drawing attention. She did not want and she could not ignore it, was as if it had a life of its own, responding to thoughts and emotions, to fear and curiosity, to hope and dread, and she began to notice small changes in herself. Sensations she could not explain, heightened awareness, a memory that did not belong to her, and dreams that were vivid and impossible in which the figure returned and gestured for her to follow. She confided in no one, the fear of ridicule, too strong. The stories she had heard about people being dismissed, laughed at, called crazy. She tried to convince herself that it was a hallucination, that the hunger and stress of her errands had played tricks on her mind, but every time she caught a glimpse of the mark in a mirror, or felt its warmth creeping along her veins, she knew the truth was far stranger than anything she could imagine. It was a connection, a tether, a sign that she had been chosen, or touched by something beyond the earth, something she could not see yet could feel in every fiber of her being. By evening she felt a restlessness she could not explain, a pull toward the forest, the river, the bridge, as if the world itself was urging her to go back to the place where it had all begun, and the mark throbbed in anticipation, vibrating in rhythm, with a faint hum that seemed to follow her like a shadow. She understood that nothing would ever be ordinary again, that the mark had changed her body, mind and soul, and that the figure from the night sky had left a calling she could neither resist nor ignore. The next day Clara walked through Millstone streets, her eyes constantly flicking to the sky, as if expecting the impossible to appear again, but the town seemed unchanged, ordinary people going about ordinary lives, unaware of the strange energy that now clung to her like a second skin. She tried to speak to friends about the night, the light, and the figure, the mark on her wrist, but every word that left her lips was met with disbelief or nervous laughter. "You are imagining things," they said, brushing her off with a pat on the shoulder, and Clara felt a wave of frustration that mingled with fear. She wanted to scream that what she had seen was real, that her life had been altered in ways they could not comprehend, yet the words seemed powerless against the skepticism that surrounded her. Authorities were even worse, their faces blank, their questions polite but dismissive, asking her to fill out reports she knew would never be read. They suggested stress, sleep deprivation, or hallucinations, even as they examined her wrist, the mark faintly glowing under fluorescent lights. She left their office feeling more alone than ever, and a creeping dread settled in her stomach. The world had continued as if nothing had happened while she carried a secret. Impossible to explain, a secret that seemed to hum through her veins with a life of its own. Despite the disbelief, Clara noticed subtle changes in the town, strange lights in the sky, reported by neighbors who had previously been too afraid to speak up, and small animals acting erratically, their eyes reflecting an unnatural intelligence. She began documenting every detail on her own, a notebook filling with sketches of the mark, observations of the forest, the river, and the strange patterns that appeared on the ground at night. Sometimes she would wake in the middle of the night sensing a presence outside her window, and the mark would pulse stronger, as if acknowledging the unseen visitor, or warning her of its arrival. Local reporters caught wind of the whispers, and began investigating timidly at first, but soon interest grew as more townspeople reported seeing the same lights and shadows. Clara became the reluctant focal point for their attention, a living record of something impossible, yet undeniable. She was cautious, answering questions vague, and measured her fear of ridicule, tempered by the strange thrill of recognition that perhaps she was not alone in witnessing the inexplicable. The longer the days passed, the more the hum returned, faint at first, and then stronger, as if resonating with her every heartbeat. It tugged at her thoughts, whispering of the forest, the river, and the bridge, calling her back to the place where she had first encountered the figure. She began noticing other changes in herself, heightened senses, flashes of memory that could not belong to her, and dreams that blurred the line between sleep and waking. She could feel the pull intensifying, and knew that skepticism and fear would not protect her from what was coming, and that sooner or later she would have to confront the truth of the mark, the light, and the figure that had chosen her beyond any human understanding. Every glance at the sky made her heart leap, every unusual sound made her ears strain, and every night she returned to her bed filled with a mixture of dread, anticipation, and awe. The town carried on, oblivious and skeptical, but Clara could no longer ignore the reality that something had altered her life forever, and the world she had once known was slipping into a realm of shadows and lights that could not be explained by reason or logic. The night came quickly over Millstone, a deep indigo sky sprinkled with stars that seemed unusually bright. Clara felt the hum in her veins growing stronger, as if the darkness itself carried a message meant only for her. She could not stay inside the house any longer. The pull of the forest, the river, and the bridge urging her onward, a whisper in the shadows that beckoned her feet to move. She grabbed her coat, and Max followed closely, sniffing the air and whining, as if he too understood that this night would be different. As she approached the edge of the forest, she saw them, the teenagers from the neighboring town, setting up camp near the old quarry, their laughter carrying faintly through the trees. Oblivious to the pulse of the night that vibrated in Clara's chest, she hesitated, unsure if she should intervene or keep moving toward the bridge. But the hum grew insistent, and she could feel the mark throbbing against her wrist, sending sparks of warmth up her arm. She stepped closer, trying to remain hidden, yet drawn irresistibly toward the strange green light that began to dance above the water like a living flame, twisting and writhing in patterns that made the hair on her arms stand on end. The teenagers noticed first the shimmer of the light and froze, staring upward as the pulsing column expanded brighter and larger until it bathed the entire quarry in an otherworldly glow. One of them pointed and laughed nervously, but the laughter died in their throats when a figure emerged from the center, the same tall, slender being Clara had seen before, its outline flickering between green and silver, and its eyes glowing faintly with an intelligence that chilled the blood. She felt the pull of the mark stronger than ever, as if the figure was aware of her presence and guiding her steps into the clearing. Suddenly a scream tore through the night. The boy closest to the water lifted his head toward the figure and vanished in a flash of light, leaving only a faint echo of terror. Max barked furiously, and Clara's heart raced. She wanted to run, but her legs moved of their own accord, drawing her closer to the center of the strange light. The other teenagers scattered, screaming, into the forest, their figures swallowed by shadows and leaves, leaving Clara standing alone, facing the being that seemed to pulse with energy and knowledge far beyond comprehension. The figure raised a hand slowly, and the green light enveloped Clara for a heartbeat. Her body lifted slightly off the ground, weightless and tingling with electricity. She felt her mind expanding as images of distant stars, alien landscapes, and impossible cities rushed into her consciousness. The hum grew louder in her ears, and for a moment she was suspended between fear and awe, unable to distinguish where she ended and the figure began. When the light finally faded, she was back at the edge of the forest, the teenagers gone, the boy she had seen vanish, nowhere in sight, Max barking and circling nervously, and the mark on her wrist glowing softly, as if acknowledging that she had survived, but also that the night had only begun. The forest seemed alive, whispering secrets in the rustling leaves, and the hum continued faintly in the distance, calling her back toward the unknown, the pull stronger than ever. And Clara knew, without a doubt, that this night would change everything, and that whatever had chosen to reveal itself once would not leave her alone again. The morning after the second night, Clara awoke to a strange stillness in the air, the town quiet and ordinary. But she knew it was a fragile illusion. The mark on her wrist glowed faintly, reminding her that the events of the night were real, and that the figure had left traces she could neither ignore nor fully understand. She checked her notebook, the sketches and notes she had compiled, showing patterns in the forest near the river, the strange lights in the sky, and the symbols that appeared on tree bark, carved by unknown forces. She decided to return to the forest, Max at her heels, his ears twitching at every sound, hoping to find clues left behind by the figure or signs of the boy who had vanished. The path seemed different from the night before, the ground soft and damp with dew and leaves shifting under her feet in ways that made her feel watched. She stopped at the clearing by the river, the same place where the teenagers had seen the lights, and gasped as she noticed strange impressions in the grass, shapes that glowed faintly under the morning sun, spirals and lines that matched the pattern of the mark on her wrist. It was as if the earth itself had recorded the event and left her a message meant to be discovered. She snapped photos, with her phone, her hands trembling, and noted the angles and positions of the symbols, trying to make sense of them. When she looked up, the forest seemed to hum faintly, the air vibrating with a frequency only she could feel, her mind filling with fragments of memory, flashes of the figure, gestures she had not consciously seen, and voices too soft to understand yet familiar in a way that unsettled her. Deeply, Clara realized that she was being guided to notice the evidence that had been left behind, as if the figure wanted her to know something important, or perhaps to warn her. Hours passed as she documented the patterns, carefully comparing them to the sketches in her notebook, trying to decipher whether they formed a map, a message, or a warning. The wind shifted and she felt a presence moving among the trees, a shadow that did not belong to any animal or human. Her pulse quickened and she held her breath, hoping it would not disappear before she could understand its purpose. Max growled softly, but did not move. Clara realized that the clues were not meant to frighten her, but to draw her deeper into the mystery and prepare her for what was coming. By evening, she returned home, exhausted but exhilarated, her mind buzzing with connections, the patterns in the forest, the mark on her wrist, the strange hum in the air, and the images of alien landscapes flooding her memory. She began to understand that the figure was studying her, or perhaps testing her in ways she could not yet comprehend, that every flash of light, every strange mark and whisper in the forest, was a piece of a puzzle far larger than Millstone, or even the earth itself. The town continued unaware, the skeptics dismissing what they could not see, but Clara knew that she was on the threshold of something extraordinary and terrifying, and that the clues would continue to guide her, whether she was ready or not. Asterisk.